Hi, Dr. Wayne.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing fine.
Thank you so much for making the time and joining us today.
Oh, sure. I was a little worried that after the second COVID vaccine that I just received this afternoon, that I might get knocked out. So if
Oh.
I end up passing out in the middle of things, it's because of that.
Well, congrats on the vaccine. I'm happy you got the second one.
Oh yeah, it's huge relief. Okay, so I have a little icon here. I know that
Mhm.
I've been through this before, but I always need a reminder. So this is a share screen. And I just click on share screen here. Do you want me to start off with the screen sharing or do that as, you know, you're going to introduce me a little bit or?
Yeah, I think it would be best to wait to screen share because our videos will become smaller when you share the screen.
Right.
And also, because this is a concurrent event, so I'm going to be in the other session, but I'll pop back in. And Maggie will be here the whole time, just in
Okay,
case
great.
anything happens. She's just finishing up the last session because
Okay.
she's moderating that one, and she'll be here in a bit. Also, yeah, I just wanted to greet you because I'm not going to be able to be here for the whole thing,
Not a
unfortunately.
problem. It's nice to see you again.
You too. Okay, I'll come back in after going to the next session.
Okay.
Thank you again.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Doing fine.
And say sorry, it took me a second to get over here. My computer wasn't sharing my audio and visual, my audio and my video, so I had to exit and come back. But I know that the previous session that we had going on just got out too. So let's give everybody one more minute, and then I have your lovely introduction pulled up, and I will introduce you.
Okay, great.
And say my mom is super excited about this session.
Excellent.
She texted me and she was like, I will be there ready to see it, because she was like, I wonder a lot about this. So she's super
okay.
All right. There we go. So let's, get started. So hello, everyone. Welcome to the Competence Conundrum with Dr. Nancy Wayne. Just to give you a little bit of insight about our speaker, Dr. Nancy Wayne has 30 years of experience teaching and leading workshops. She is founder and president of Women Advancing Together, which I will drop the link to her website in the chat. And that is an organization that provides women, male allies, and institutional leaders with practical, goal-oriented, evidence-based tools and best practices to help overcome gender-based barriers in the workplace. Dr. Wayne is Professor Emerita of Physiology at the David Geffen School of Medicine at UCLA. She is a reproductive physiologist and was principal investigator of a biomedical research laboratory for over 25 years. Her current research is in the social sciences, including topics on gender bias and leadership. She received her BA in biology from Northwestern University, a PhD in physiology from the University of Michigan, and her postdoctoral training was done at the University of Virginia. So before I hand it over, we do ask that you are respectful of our speaker, and if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. So I'm going to hand it off to you. Thank you, Dr. Wayne.
Okay. Thank you so much, Maggie, and the entire Women in STEM team for inviting me and for organizing this fantastic event. So I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully that will work. All right, let's see. No, that's not working so far. Let's see. All right, can you see?
So you're going to want to just share your application window of just your PowerPoint. That's why we can see your whole screen. But this, I think everybody can see this as well. So this shows.
Okay. I think we're going to have to do this because the reading, I don't have that reading option on mine. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, all right. So why don't we just dive right in and want to go over the workshop objectives. First, we're going to discuss the ramifications of gender differences in confidence levels and its impact on educational and career outcomes. You're going to recognize the skills at which you excel, because you all have skills that you're great at, and you're going to at least say them in your head out loud, and I'm going to encourage you to put them into the chat. And we're going to discuss ways in which you can identify and promote your skills in order to get the recognition that you deserve. So I love this quote from Dr. Richard Petty, who was a professor of psychology at Ohio State University. Confidence is the stuff that turns thoughts into action. And this is really important because we're constantly thinking creative and great thoughts, but unless you turn them into some sort of action, you might as well not have thought them at all. And it's confidence that mediates that thinking into action. But there is a caveat by some unknown smart person. There is a thin line between confidence and arrogance. It's called humility. Confidence smiles, arrogance smirks. And it is a very thin line. And oftentimes, people will mistake confidence for arrogance, even though you were being confident with great humility. And we'll talk about this more in a little bit. So something to think about as you move through your education and your career is that confidence is important for labor market and career outcomes. And it's often more important than actual competence and skills in getting ahead in the workplace. So we all know examples of the confident and overconfident man who gets the job, gets the raise, gets the C-suite corner office, even though he did not have nearly the equivalent skills as a woman in that organization. It happens a lot. It happens all the time. Confidence in men is considered a very attractive trait, but that's not so much the case in women. And so women are constantly having to walk a narrow line between being confident so that she can get ahead in the workplace, okay, get what she needs in order to get the job done, but not look like an arrogant bitch. So, excuse my French, but I have been called that many times for being confident and for being outspoken in the workplace, and it can be a very uncomfortable place to be. So what I want to show you are two studies of competence problems in STEM fields. One is going to focus on competent women's lack of confidence, causing them to leave STEM fields. And the second study is one that I actually did and published a while ago, but nothing has changed since the study was published in 2010, showing that both men and women believe that women make poor leaders, leading to gender bias in leadership. So not surprisingly, there are negative outcomes to this, lack of confidence, where well-educated, talented women won't get ahead in the workforce. And when they do get ahead, it's typically for less salary than men. So let's take a look at some data, because I'm a scientist, you're all scientists, and we love data. So let's take a look at some data. So the first study, competent women's lack of confidence causes them to leave STEM fields. I'm going to be focusing on the field of engineering. So this is a bit of a complicated slide, so I'm going to go through it slowly. This was published in American Sociological Review in 2011. And you might be saying to yourself, oh, for God's sake, that was 10 years ago. This isn't relevant anymore. But it is. Nothing has changed in the last 10 years since this study first came out. So what we have here on the y-axis is all of the comparative data between women in red and men in blue, normalized to the male value, which I think is hilarious. So that men are considered normal, whereas women are always in comparison to the normal. But I'm just showing you the data the way that it was presented in this paper. So men are always at 1, and then women are up and down from this normalized value of the male. Anywhere where you see an asterisk or 2 asterisks, that means it was significantly different, the comparison between the women in red and the men in blue. So there was a whole lot of different values and factors that these researchers looked at. And these are undergraduate men and women in engineering fields across the country, across the United States. It was actually a very large data set. So if we take a look at their GPA, there was no significant difference between the women and the men. If we take a look at Math SAT, again, we see no difference between the women and the men. And this was very interesting. They asked the question of these very young people, project into the future, how important do you think family will be to you as you get older? And there was absolutely no difference there. But then things start to fall apart. We see with a self-assessment of math exams that women underestimated how they did on their math exam compared to the men. We see this over and over and over again, including studies that I have done comparing men and women and their self-assessment and projecting how they did on an exam before they actually saw their score. Expertise confidence, much lower in women compared to the men. What follows from that is a career fit confidence that's much lower in women compared to men. Persistence in engineering majors, not surprisingly, much lower in women compared to men because they're lacking that expertise and career fit confidence. And then the upshot is that far fewer women who started in engineering continue to plan a career in engineering compared to the men. It's not that men didn't drop out, they did. It's just that women dropped out at a much higher rate. So why? Why is this happening? These are women based on these two values over here as a surrogate for competence, skill level, where they should have been successful, where they should have gone into this with a confidence that matched their competence. So why did things fall apart for them? Well, it has nothing to do really with anything that is innate in the women. It's the societal pressures that are placed on women in STEM, and in this case, engineering, telling them you're not good enough, you don't belong, you don't have the skills when they clearly do. And so this is a huge problem. Okay, so this was published in 2011, 10 years ago. And what has happened is that all this time, the past 10 years, the previous many decades, engineering loses women from making possible important contributions to the field of engineering. And things have not really changed over a prolonged period of time. So what I want to show you here is data from a 2018 Science and Engineering Indicators publication. This was the latest publication, was 2018. And it's looking at women in science and engineering occupations between 1993 and 2015. So that's this x-axis here. And it's the percent of women in different science and engineering occupations. And if you can see this down at the bottom in this pale pink, that's the engineers. So this is after they've already graduated and have gotten a job. This is the percentage of women in engineering occupations is the lowest of all of the STEM fields. The highest, not surprisingly, is in the social sciences. Physical sciences is orange. Over here, it's kind of buried by many of the other occupations in science. And you'll see that it has remained stubbornly below 20%. We can do so much better, but it takes a village. And I listened to the Dean of Engineering's welcome speech, and I was so happy to hear that. She's going to be doing amazing things for UCLA engineering and supporting women. And if there's any engineers here, go for it. Don't let the naysayers keep you down. So let's push on. So this lack of confidence that leads competent women to leave engineering and other STEM fields is part of a larger problem known as stereotype threat. And this is something that comes out of the social science literature. So I'm going to define what stereotype threat is, and then I'm going to give you an example because it's a lot of mumble jumble language here. So stereotype threat is the fear that a negative stereotype of whatever group with which an individual identifies is true. And this fear affects the performance in a direction that supports the stereotype, even when the stereotype is not true. So that's a whole lot of words. Let's take a look at an example. So here's a very common stereotype that a lot of people believe, including my daughters. They believe that they and other girls and women are bad at math, even though I have pounded that into their brains since they were toddlers, that they are in fact good at math, and so am I as a woman. They didn't believe it because they were getting messaging from people other than me. So girls and women are bad at math. That's the stereotype. Therefore, they will do poorly at math because they believe the stereotype. Well, how do we know that? Well, because you can eliminate the stereotype threat by creating an identity-safe environment. And so this was a very interesting study that took place, and it was published in 2005 by Davies and colleagues. And what they did is they did a study on undergraduate students in a math class. And they divided the class into two groups, a control group who was given the instructions just prior to starting the math exam. This is a really hard exam. People don't do so well on this exam. Go, right? And when you look at the outcome, the women did significantly worse than the men on this exam. The intervention group was given these instructions. It was the same exact exam, but it was a different group of students. This is a really hard exam, but in the past, women have done just as well as men on this exam. Go. And the women did just as well as the men on the exam, which is remarkable. So let's take a closer look at that. I'm going to tell you about a study that I conducted. It was a long time ago, but nothing, again, has changed. And that's where both men and women believe the stereotype that women make poor leaders, even though there's evidence to the contrary. So studies have shown that men and women in aggregate, and they're separate gender groups, have great leadership skills if they're trained to be leaders, but those leadership skills are very different. In aggregate, women are what are called transformational leaders. So if your organization needs to make a change in order to survive, okay, you're better off hiring a woman because she's the one who's going to lead the change. On the other hand, in aggregate, men are what are called laissez-faire leaders. So if your organization is doing very well and you want it steady as you go, you're better off hiring a man because he's not going to change very much. He's going to keep it slow and steady, stay the course. So those are very different types of leadership styles, and each one is good under different circumstances. So it's not that women are worse leaders than men. They're different leaders than men. So, okay, before I jump into the data, I want to tell you about a course that I had taught since 1994. And it was a reproductive physiology course for first-year medical students. And part of that course was a review session where I broke up the students with a class size of about 150 to 180 students, depending on the year. And they were broken up into different small groups. And each group got, of these small groups, got 5 questions that were cases that they needed to solve all together in a group. And these were mixed groups, men and women. And then I would ask for a volunteer to come up to the front of the class to guide the discussion, and I would help out when they needed some help. And nobody ever wanted to volunteer for this, even though they were all friends. So it was, fraught with angst, so to speak. And but this was something that I insisted on, that somebody needed to come up to the front of the class and guide the discussion. So this began in 1994, and in 2007, so many years later, a student came up to me at the end of one of these small group sessions and said, "Dr. Wayne, did you notice that all the small group leaders were men? Is that typical?" And I was shocked because I didn't notice, and I should have, and I had no idea if this was typical. So the following year, I decided to take notes. And I want to point out that for many decades prior to this, or I should say about 2 decades prior to this event, where this was called out to me by one of the students, the class size and the component of the class of medical schools was about 50-50 men and women. So, the group leaders should have been 50-50. That was the expectation. It would have been in parity. So when I started taking notes, male, female, and this was my perception of male, female. I didn't take into consideration non-binary because there wasn't a language for that really in 2007. And so I did my best to, guess, and it was usually pretty clear by the way that the students were presenting themselves in terms of their dress and how, and the pronouns that were used. So I was pretty safe that I was accurate. And what I found was that 75% of the group leaders were men. And this was horrifying to me because I felt that as a leader of this course, that I would be a good role model for the women in the course and that they would step up into this really minor leadership role, but they weren't. So I went to the deans of the medical school and I showed them the data. And that was when I learned about stereotype threat, and we designed a study to an intervention to try to reverse this bias and eliminate it. So now I'm going to show you the second study that was done. So here we have in blue the percent of women in all sessions. These are our first-year medical students. You can see it's 50%, about 50% women, a little bit more than 50% women. So this is what we've been seeing for decades. And the control group just received their normal instructions of, what you're supposed to do and during the session, and please answer the questions, and we need a volunteer to come up to the front of the class to guide the discussion. Once again, second year in a row, we have about 25, 30%, here about 30% of the group leaders were women. And this was significantly lower than what it should have been when we have 50-50 women and men in the class. So then the question is, what happened with the intervention group? And what was the intervention? So the intervention basically was a pep talk that followed my control instructions, the typical instructions that I give. And it's a very simple, very subtle pep talk. And it goes like this. If you've never tried out being a group leader, this is a safe environment to step up and try it out. It doesn't matter if you were a history major or a science major, a man or a woman, or if you took time off between undergrad and medical school. We expect every medical student of the David Geffen School of Medicine at UCLA to be a leader in their chosen field. Hey, that was it. So what happened? Suddenly, the gender bias disappeared. And what was really interesting is when we interviewed men and women who were leaders and not leaders, and we asked them, why did you step up to be a leader, or why didn't you step up to be a leader? Many of the women who chose to be a leader said, I've never done it before, but for some reason, I don't know why, I decided to take a chance and be a leader this time. And interestingly, some of the men who did not step up to be a group leader said things like, normally I speak out, I talk a lot in class, but for some reason I decided to stand back and let somebody else do it. So it was having an effect. This pep talk was having an effect in both directions. Women were stepping up, men were standing back. The other thing that was really interesting is when we asked them, okay, there were these two groups. What group do you remember being in? They didn't remember. So this was very subtle. And it's an important lesson that both our negative words and our positive words are very powerful. And they have an amazing effect on how we behave and how we think about ourselves. And I think about this a lot. And the study was done in 2008 to 2009. I only get a chance to do this study once a year. And, I've been putting this into practice ever since. So there's a strong link between perceived leadership ability and professional advancement, not just in academic medicine, but in all fields. When women are easy in leadership roles, be it in school or later in their careers, we are disenfranchising half of our population that has the potential to make significant contributions to their profession. So my advice is to give pep talks. They're important, and they have really powerful outcomes. So if that's the one takeaway that you come from this, let that be the takeaway. So I want to follow this up with some confidence building exercises. Name your skills. And this is from, again, an older paper, but I really like to cite the original papers. This comes from a Nature article. It wasn't a research article. It was an editorial in Nature called Unmasking the Imposter, and I modified it for this workshop. So one of the pieces of advice that Kaplan gives is to get your support system in place. So where does that support system comes from? Comes from your advisors, your mentors, your friends and family, your partner. And if there are people on this list that should be part of your support system, but they are regularly not supporting you, maybe you should think about jettisoning them from your circle of people. So what I would like for you to do is to, and I don't think that I can see the chat box at the same time that you write in who your valued supporters are. So I'm going to rely on our moderator for calling them out as they get written in. So I'm going to start. I'm not going to write it, but I'm going to say it out loud. A valued supporter of mine is my husband is a huge supporter of mine. My children are supporters of mine. But also the president of the University of Redlands has been an amazing supporter of mine, very valued and appreciated.
So Zoe wrote in the chat that her mom is a really big supporter of her.
Great.
I was gonna say, I know for me, definitely my family and my partner, they've been like popping in and out of even of this conference. like the last 2 days. So like they're definitely really big supporters too.
Wonderful.
Zoe also said her advisor is a really big supporter. Diane says her fiance and her family are really big supporters of her. Teresa says her advisor and her boyfriend. Sarah, her dad and her advisor. Zoe said her cat. She has a great cat. Claudia said my partner, sister, and brother-in-law, so her close family. Sarah said, yes, my kitties too. Does anybody else have any supporters?
So I'm all for pets being supporters. And I'm a dog person. And I have to say, my very first dog as an adult, he was my biggest fan. And when I had to practice talks that I was giving at national meetings, I would practice it in front of him, and he would do that dog thing, you know, where he tilts his head one way and then tilts his head the other way. And, you know, he would listen to me go over and over my talks, no matter how many times, never got bored, was always fascinated. He was, you know, that feels good. I have to tell you, even though it's not a human, feels good.
I was gonna say, I love that. My dogs, my dogs just run around. We got a few more responses in the chat.
Okay.
Zoe also said her besties, the WeSTEM conference organizers. Zoe, I appreciate you too. Alexandra said, my mom for sure. She's the biggest support in my life.
Really wonderful, really important. And I love that friends and family are being given shout outs for they're our most important support system for the rest of our lives. And we get to be their support system as well. Okay, the next bit of advice is, in order to build your confidence, is to make a list of your strengths to remind yourself and to remind others of your accomplishments. So the easiest way to do this is to constantly be updating your curriculum vitae and or your resume, whatever it is that you choose to do, to update it every time you do something that's important, that needs to be in a curriculum vitae or a resume. Don't wait until you have to send it off someplace. Do it as it's happening. And what that does is it forces you to review all these accomplishments of yours and to give yourself a pat on the back. My full CV, after it's almost 40 years of being a scientist, is almost 40 pages long. I mean, it's out of control. I have to have a short CV because nobody wants to read my full CV, but I keep it because it really is a list of my life's work, and I'm never letting go of that. Also, keep an ongoing list of compliments you received. So for me, I have been keeping a list of student evaluations for my classes, not the negative ones. I do read those and I pay attention to them, but the ones I keep in a separate file are the good ones. You know, Dr. Wayne, this was the best. You're the best teacher ever. You know, I'm going to keep those, right? So in the chat box, write in one of your strengths. I want you to name it. And it doesn't have to be a technical strength. It can be a strength of your people skills, you know, that, you know, you're a fantastic friend, that people can count on you. Those are really important skills. And if you've got fabulous technical skills, name that.
All right.
So I will just start this off. I will name one of my skills. I have this uncanny ability to matchmake between people from different disciplines. I see how the two of them could become really great collaborators, and I introduce them to each other, and I celebrate when it works out well.
I was gonna say, I love that. We have like a whole bunch of people that are coming in with stuff. Personally love Zoe's response. She said, I'm pretty smart sometimes, which Zoe, that's why you're here. Confidence. Diane said, being empathetic. We also have reliable and patient, super collaborative, and stubbornness to see things through. I know, like, my family says I'll talk to anybody, so willingness to just talk to people. But yeah, it looks like that's
those are fantastic strengths, and all of these strengths will serve you very well no matter what you do in the future. It'll serve you well at work, but it'll also serve you well at home. These are very important strengths in all aspects of your life. All right, let's move on. Be aware of your language choices. If you find yourself thinking you were lucky, don't say that. I mean, sometimes, you know, if you're playing the lottery, yes, it's all about luck. But when something good has happened in your life, there may have been an element of luck in it, but focus on what you did to earn it, because that's really what should be in the front of your mind when something good happened. So it could be that you did very well on an exam, that you passed your qualifying exam if you're a graduate student, that you got a great internship, that you got a great job, that you got into graduate school, that you got a grant, that you got a travel award, whatever it is. Focus on what you did to earn it. So in the chat box, write a recent achievement. So my recent achievement is that after 28 years of a tenure track faculty position at UCLA, I retired. And that was a huge achievement. It's a life achievement. I retired to do something else, and that is to be president of Women Advancing Together, a professional development business.
I love that. Congratulations on retiring. That's so exciting.
Yeah.
Oh, the accomplishments are coming in. So Jeannie says that she finished her capstone. Diane just finished up her 3rd year of medical school. Teresa wrote her first proposal. Sarah finished her class requirements for grad school. Zoe published a paper this morning, which I knew about. She linked it there, so you can all go and check that out. Give her some views. I was gonna say, I think my biggest accomplishment right now is literally this conference.
Yeah, that's a big accomplishment. Congratulations. Congratulations to everybody. These are great. And write them into your curriculum vitae, like the minute that you're done tonight with today's sessions. This is really important. Remind yourself that sometimes good enough is good enough. If you have a tendency to be a perfectionist, you can get bogged down in trying to make something perfect. It'll stop you in your tracks. It'll stop you from moving ahead and actually completing your task. There are very few things that have to be perfect. If you become an anesthesiologist, you better be perfect. Or else your patient might get into a lot of trouble. And I'm assured by my anesthesiology friends that that is actually the case. They always feel that they have to be perfect. If you're a bridge builder, you have to be perfect. But for the rest of us, sometimes good enough is good enough. And I don't have anything to put into the chat on that. But that is where we're going to end, and I'm very happy to take your questions and your comments, and I will stop sharing this. And let's see, stop sharing. All right, so happy to take your your questions and comments. And Lisa says, I had 2 former students this semester tell me that I inspired them. That's fantastic.
So if you have any questions or comments, you can drop them in the chat or in the Q&A tab, and I will check both of them regularly at least. But I guess, so Jeannie says, is it possible to access a recording of this afterwards? I would love to watch this again for a motivation boost.
Great.
Well, yes, we are recording. If you see the little red light on the top of your screen, we're recording this session. So we will be posting it for later. For a short period of time, because I agree, Nancy's awesome. So I'm going to have to watch this again when I need a little bit of a boost.
The other thing that I want to say is that I write blogs every month. And so anybody who wants to sign up for my monthly blogs, Maggie, maybe we could make that happen.
Yeah.
You can sign up via my website. And my very first blog was called the Competence Confidence Conundrum. And I'll send that to Maggie so that she can distribute it. But you can also find it on my blog site, on my website. And so, once this recording doesn't exist anymore, the blog does.
So I posted the link to Nancy's website in the chat. Feel free to check it out and save it for later. We will also send it out tonight. We'll also send it out tonight after everything, so that you have you'll be able to get it again later if you don't want to click on it now. But we have some, comments. So Teresa said, thank you for that comment about perfectionism. I think I suffer from that a little bit. So it's good to hear I don't have to make everything perfect.
Right. And I have to say that I am a big fan myself of good enough is good enough. I have never been a perfectionist. I saw the dangers of that with family and friends. And I made it to the top of my profession with not just the attitude, but the practice of good enough is good enough.
I was going to say, you really did. We were just talking yesterday about how hard it is to break into academia. Guys, it is a bottleneck. So to have the accomplishments that Nancy has is amazing. Diane also said she really appreciated how you talked about the power of a pep talk. So Taylor has a question. Taylor says, at what point in your career did you realize you should start updating your CV after each achievement?
Okay, great question. So that was advice that was given to me by a close colleague of mine who was actually instrumental in recruiting me to UCLA. So it was as a brand new assistant professor, and that was what he told me. His name is Jared Diamond. He's still at UCLA. He's a Pulitzer Prize winner. He started off in the Department of Physiology, but being a Renaissance man has very broad interests, and moved into the college in the Department of Geography, and studies human geography as well as physiology. He had given me amazing advice. He was a close mentor of mine when I was starting out my career. He told me to do that. He told me to do a lot of other things. He's a genius, so I just took his advice, and it was good advice. So I'm passing on his advice that he gave to me to all of you.
I was going to say his book, Guns, Germs, and Steel, is honestly one of my favorites. I read it when I was like 14 or 15, and I still have my first copy of it. So big fan of him.
Yeah, so I have that book, and he came out after that with a book called Collapse, which is really frightening. Oh.
Yeah, it is. But so is Guns, Germs, and Steel, honestly.
It's all frightening, yeah.
So. Well, I have a question, kind of just because we're talking about like confidence and things like that. When do you think, I guess, like if you feel like you can like do something like starting your own group and like leadership and things, going into like branching out onto your own, when do you honestly think that, is there a time that you ever really have enough experience to be able to do that? Or is it just kind of like something that you just have to go in and take the plunge?
So women, much more than men, feel that they have to dot every I, cross every T, be experts in everything before they take that next step in their education or their career. Men don't do that. So why is that? Well, it's not because there's biological differences in, how we're made up in that particular way. Again, it comes from external messaging. Women, and this is a lot of research has been done on this, women are not given the benefit of the doubt like men are. And this holds us back. And so my advice, which is the advice that a lot of leaders in various fields, women leaders in various fields, when I interview them, it's the same message. Reach beyond what you think you're qualified for, because we're all smart. We're all smart in different ways. We're all smart in our own ways. We can learn on the job, right? You can learn on the job. A president of a company does not know how to be a president of a company when they were a vice president, or an assistant vice president. They learned what they needed to know on the job. We can figure it out. So anybody who is smart enough to be a student or a postdoc or a faculty member at UCLA is smart enough to figure it out on the job. You need to convince the person who's going to hire you, okay, that you have the qualifications. Give me the benefit of the doubt, because I will deliver. I have always delivered.
I feel like that is something I personally need to work on, because I do know that I tend to undersell myself when I have to talk to about things, which is something I have been told several times by people. So that is definitely some advice I know that I'll be taking with me. So thank you.
And once you reach for beyond what you think that you're qualified for, and it works, and you can see that you're capable of learning on the job, it makes that next leap easier. That first step can be the hardest one.
I like that. One step at a time kind of thing. I know that, I got DM'd a question. So somebody said that you spoke a little bit about women in STEM and how they have the lower engagement and everything than men. How do you make your presence known in let me get the exact wording of this, known in the workplace when men are constantly overpowering or speaking over you?
Okay.
Yeah, they're is it being confident or is it being considered rude?
Okay, so this is a really important question and point. And it was, again, one of the earlier blogs, and I actually have a workshop on the importance of self-promotion, where women have to self-promote in a different way than men. And it's all in the way that we're socialized. Men recognize that self-promotion is important to get ahead. They are socialized to toot their own horn, and it's accepted by everybody, men and women. When women self-promote, it's not looked upon favorably, right? And it's not looked upon favorably by women as well, right? So women don't like it when other women promote themselves. So there's some exercises that I do with women and with men to self-promote in a way where you don't look like a self-serving jerk. So again, these are blogs about how to put together, how to self-promote, right? So and I'm going to give you an example. For those of you who just recently published a paper or had a paper accepted for publication, and this just is an example, send it out to the most important colleagues in your field. And it could be just as a PDF file. Don't make them hunt for it, all right? As a PDF file. And it's like, dear Dr. So-and-so, I thought that you would find this article that I just published in Bloody Bloody Journal interesting, because it is related to the work that's going on in your field. What's the worst that can happen? They don't open up the email, they throw it away. But I'll tell you, that was something that Jared Diamond told me to do. So I did it because he's a genius and I'm not. And I have in my files a handwritten letter by someone who I sent that to, who is the biggest name in the field of neuroscience at the time, and he's a pretty big deal now. He was a future Nobel Prize winner, Eric Kandel. And I got his signature the old-fashioned way, not an email, not a text, but a handwritten letter on embossed, letterhead. How cool is that?
I'm saying I would have that framed, honestly.
Well, I haven't framed it yet, but I didn't throw it away. I still have it, and
that's all that matters.
You never know. You never know where it's going to lead. And so when I came up for a big time promotion as full professor, he was asked to write a letter. Well, he was able to write a letter because he knew who I was, and I never thought of myself as being a big enough deal for him to pay attention to me. But I took that chance because there was no downside whatsoever. The other thing that I want you all to practice is your 2-minute elevator pitch, right? And I wrote a blog about that as well. How to do it in a way where, what's the problem that you were, tasked with solving, or that you tasked yourself with solving? What action did you take? And what were the outcomes, or what were your hopes for results? You put it together in 2 minutes or less, right? You have a whole bunch of those ready. And when you get good at it, okay, they'll just roll off your tongue, right? But you have to practice before you can get good at just kind of spontaneously coming up with these 2-minute elevator pitches for the moment. You want to talk about the I first, or my. And so an example would be from my recent past. I was asked by the UCLA chancellor to lead an effort for lab safety on this campus following the death of a chemistry student, or actually chemistry staff member. And I put together a team of people from across the sciences, and we were able to make changes to policies and practices that made a difference for the culture of safety at UCLA and throughout the UC system. And it actually raced across the United States and made a big difference for safety in laboratories. And I'm very proud of this work, and I'm very proud of this team of people who were able to move the needle forward.
I was going to say, I had no idea that you were part of that effort, but I know that where I went to undergrad and where Diane went to, because we do know each other from undergrad, if you worked in a lab, we did have the UC safety training over in upstate New York. So that was definitely something that I recognized when we came here, because it was the same one that I was like, wait, I did this back home. So that's really amazing.
So I played a leadership role in that. My role was Associate Vice Chancellor for Research with a laboratory safety portfolio. And it wasn't just me alone. It was, it was a team of people that had to move the needle very, very quickly. And it made a huge impact.
I mean, clearly, yeah, you're using it everywhere. So that's awesome.
So I was going to give that 2-minute elevator speech. I've given it before. I used to have to practice it, in my head, because I knew that somebody I would run into on campus or in Westwood, hey, Wayne, what's going on with lab safety? Hey, Wayne, how come I've got all these, lab safety, officers running around in my lab? I mean, I'd have to give a pep talk, give a the 2-minute elevator speed, you know, like I have to come up with these things and quickly because people are like racing from one place to another. So you get better at it.
It seems so. I do want to be cognizant of time, everybody. We do have like 3 minutes left. If you do have a question, now's the time to ask. If not, like, I mean, like I can just like keep. I was gonna say I personally looked through Nancy's website. This is what I do when we get speakers. Was that I like did a deep dive creep on them, and like found all the social media and everything. Everything like that. So I'm not ashamed. So one of the things that we actually just heard from like a coach in our last session, and I had noticed on your website that you also do one-on-one coaching.
Yes.
Can you talk a little, just like really briefly, about like what it means to be a coach?
Right.
Because I don't think we've been talking about sponsorship and mentorship, and I don't think people know what coaching would be.
So coaching has a lot of overlap with mentoring, but it's a little bit different in that I am, as a coach, the way that I coach, I'm very focused on what is the challenge that you are currently facing, right? And it could be something very specific, or it could be just something I don't know what I want to do with my future. And we work on that together. And now you might have a mentor who does that, but typically mentors don't do a deep dive into your challenges. And coming from the outside, where I have no skin in the game of you as a student or a postdoc or a faculty member or a staff member, I'm not part of your organization. I can be very honest. It's all completely confidential, right? So the people who I coach, oftentimes they spend 45 minutes crying with me on Zoom, because it is such a relief and a release to tell their truth and to realize that there's somebody there who is going to commit themselves to help you work through this and to give you tools so that in the long term, you have something that you can lean on to help you through some of your problem-solving challenges.
I'm sorry, I really like that. If you are looking for somebody to be a coach, there you go. You are on my left side, so that is why I'm pointing this way. If Nancy is on your right side on your screen, then it's that way. But if you are looking for somebody like that, clearly Nancy knows what she's talking about.
So on my website, I do have a one-on-one coaching page. Take a look at that. And if you are a student, I give 50% off. I don't say that. I don't say that on my website, but I'm telling you now, I don't charge full freight for students, undergrads or graduate students.
We'll cut that out of the video, so you know, not public knowledge. But I just wanted to thank you again for coming and giving us this awesome session. I know I had a lot of things to take away from it. Clearly, other people did too, just based on the comments. But we really appreciate it, and we really appreciate you taking the time to come and join us on this platform today.
It was great. Go Bruins.
Yes, go Bruins. If you do want to check out more about Nancy, our website is linked in the chat. And again, we will be sending it out later. So don't worry if you miss it now. Right now, we are actually entering tea time. So it is time to meet other people in the conference. Thank you, Nancy.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So you can go and check out our other community rooms that we have in the sessions tab. So you can just head over there, and there's a whole bunch of different rooms where you can meet new people. At 4 o'clock, we will be joined by OSTEM, who will lead us in another intersectionality discussion today, just from a little bit of a different perspective. So join us then, and we will see you there. If you do want to talk with me or any of the other organizers, just bop around the community rooms. We will all be there. So thank you again for coming, and we'll see you in the other sections of the conference. Yeah, definitely check out Nancy's blog. I spent a lot of time reading it after we got her as a speaker. So make sure to check that out.